Well, hello, and welcome to the Holmes Cinema Clues, Masks, Mirrors, and Media, a show where film, television, and theater become a lens for understanding neurodiversity. Here, we go beyond the screen to explore the characters who mask, mirror, and struggle to belong, often hiding in plain sight. Join our hosts Dan and Dr. Stephanie Holmes as we invite you to step into the role of cinema detective to examine how autism, ADHD, and other neurodivergent experiences are portrayed in the media. This isn't therapy. It's not diagnosis. Rather, it's thoughtful conversation mixed with cultural analysis for a deeper look inside the stories that shape how we see ourselves as well as one another. So, settle in, sharpen your lens, and get ready to follow the clues with your hosts, Dan and Dr. Stephanie Holmes. Are you ready? Let's begin.
Every story has a subtext. Every character has a code. Where some see a script, we see a pattern. I'm cinema agent Dr. Stephanie, the autism researcher, autism specialist, and autism ally. And welcome to Holmes Cinema Clues. I'll be joined today by my cinema agent and profiler, Dave Glick, and we are going to be talking about hiding in plain sight, the neurodivergent magnet in this clip.
Girls only want boyfriends who have great skills. You know, like nunchuck skills, bow hunting skills, computer hacking skills.
How was school?
Worst day of my life? What do you think? Idiot. What kind of bike do you have?
It's a sledgehammer.
Dang. You ever take it off any sweet jumps?
What are you drawing?
A liger.
What's a liger?
It's my favorite animal. It's like a lion and a tiger mixed.
Why are you so sweaty?
I've been practicing some dance moves. Is Trisha here?
Is that on my driveway?
That's my ride.
Okay, cinema agent Dave, what do you think about first Napoleon Dynamite? What do you think about him meeting autism criteria? Because there's arguments on the internet about whether or not he meets the criteria.
Well, we can find whatever we want to find on the internet. So I don't know if you want to use that as your Bible or diagnostic tool or what people say, but I think Napoleon Dynamite is 100% terrific. That I relate to it as someone who was neurodiverse and different growing up in a major way. And also for me, growing up in a little town, even though I grew up 45 minutes out of Manhattan, Kinnelon, New Jersey, sometimes felt a lot like rural Pennsylvania. So I understand what it's like to be neurodiverse or different in a little town where everybody knows your business. And I definitely see neurodiversity in Pedro, in Napoleon, in is it Deb? I'm sorry. The woman who becomes his girlfriend, I think, is Deb in the film. But anyway, no, I think it's classic. I think it provided a lot of relief for people who felt this way and didn't know how to fit in, just as how many neurodivergent people got relief from seeing Star Trek when they saw the Mr. Spock. This person could be weird and cool all at the same time. And I think Napoleon Dynamite is an extension of that, but put into a modern context that, you know, us neurodivergent folks, we could dream of being on a starship on the USS Enterprise, but it's not real until we go to our conventions once or twice a year. It feels more real. But it's more, you could very relatable. You could see this happening in your town, in your life as well.
Well, one of our colleagues, Jody Carlton, in her new book, The Misunderstood Mind, talks about before we even had high-functioning autism or Asperger's syndrome, she said creatives who are ADHD and autism have really been writing themselves into plots over the decades. And so while we didn't have that language or criteria, there's a lot of people in the creative arts that are neurodivergent, and some of our favorite characters tend to be neurodivergent. Now, Dan, when this movie came out, loved it. I didn't quite resonate with it, but Dan thought it was amazing.
As do I. There's no
past of Dan and his friends.
No, it's amazing then. It's amazing now. I mean, if any film is ready for a sequel, it's Napoleon Dynamite. And if I were to make the sequel, he'd probably be living in Silicon Valley as a tech Was it?
Right. Him and Pedro probably running the company.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's start with Napoleon. What clips do you have to show us Napoleon Dynamite's neurodivergent tendencies?
Okay, let me pull one right now. This is when Napoleon and Pedro met for the first time. You see the principal, who clearly feels uncomfortable with any type of difference that seems or diversity. He's purposely cast that way, kind of an uptight guy. And it's interesting how he says to Napoleon, show the new kid around. And if you watch the film, he clearly doesn't like the new kid being Pedro.
Hey, is that a new kid or something?
Napoleon, this is Pedro. Would you mind showing him where his locker is?
Sure. Come on. There's like a buttload of gangs at this school. This one gang kept wanting me to join because I'm pretty good with the bow staff. Did you ride the bus to school?
No, I ride my bike.
What kind of bike do you have?
It's a sledgehammer.
Dang! You got shocks, pegs. Lucky. You ever take it off any sweet jumps? You got like 3 feet of air that time. Can I try it really quick?
So what we see here, let's look at when they first meet, that the initial interaction between Pedro and between Napoleon, neither of them make eye contact with each other. And even before they begin to talk, you see Pedro with, his body in a weird shape, his posture being somewhat odd, which I think is a form of self-soothing. And you see Napoleon speaking to the locker instead of making eye contact with him and them talking. So I feel what we see there is we see a central nervous system handshake. Let's see if we can make our neurotypes work together. Can our neurotypes communicate with each other? Can they interface with each other? And they found out they could. And if you look at the interactions between them too, that the sensory inputs are nice and low. If the sensory inputs were too intense or too high, you'd see one of them repel from each other as well. You see another theme there, that with Pedro being Latino, him having a different orientation towards meeting new people too, that it's not what I have and what you don't have. It's that we're all in this together. And you see the very quick bonding too, which often happens with neurodiverse people, getting very close to people very quickly, having that social naivete as well. Napoleon tries to smokescreen into something he's not. Like he says, there's gangs in this school. The gangs want me to join because I'm pretty fierce with a bow, some kind of weird hunting. I'm not sure what that is, but I can imagine. And him trying to make himself out to be larger than he really is, because he doesn't really know how to connect. Okay. But because they're two similar types, they were able to do that, and it was the perfect fit.
So there's arguments that his social awkwardness, I'm in agreement with you, but I did my research kind of on what other people are saying, why they don't believe he is. So they believe, or there's some out there that believe that his social awkwardness is more about being out in a rural place, the trauma of not having parents and being raised by this grandmother that's a little interesting, and this person didn't see any sensory issues. So what would you say to that argument?
I would agree, but I would disagree at the same time, that it is true that people, children especially, who have been traumatized can appear as neurodiverse. But at the same time, if you were that traumatized, you'd see other behaviors which indicate the trauma. Things like him absconding from school, him not trying to be friendly or to trust anyone either. Okay, and other things they probably weren't going to show in the film that trauma survivors exhibit as well. So I'm not seeing that. But you see, the whole argument can be flipped on its ear at the same time, because we know that people who are neurodiverse, most especially people who are on the autism spectrum, are born with PTSD. You see, this is often left out of the argument that if you truly, I mean, there's different forms of neurodiversity, such as dyslexia and the such, but someone who's born autistic is going to be born with an enlarged amygdala, which is the part of your brain responsible for fight or flight. And it's the part of the brain that makes you hypervigilant, makes you paranoid. And so it's important to remember that the neurodiverse folks who are autistic are essentially born with PTSD. It doesn't take much to make them hypervigilant and paranoid and somewhat nervous. So you see, the person could be right. The person can also be very wrong based on that. You know, where you draw that line, I'm not sure. When I'm dealing with parents whose kids are, where we're making it clear this is the kid's diagnosis, that, so why is he so nervous? Why is he so scared? As I explained, look, he was essentially born with PTSD, if that makes sense.
I've heard that quite a bit. What other clip do you have for us that's specifically about Napoleon and proving this case that he's probably on the spectrum?
Well, still sticking with the clip we just saw, you see that, we had an old diagnosis, which isn't that old, called Asperger's syndrome, which was what Napoleon, in fact, when the film was made, that would have been his diagnosis, would have been Asperger's syndrome, that he had average to above average IQ, but his social skills were incredibly poor. So what we knew, the rule of thumb was, how do you tell the difference between someone who's Asperger's and someone who's high-functioning autism when we had those diagnoses, was that the person with Asperger's wants to connect with another person. They don't have the skills to do it. The high-functioning autistic would be indifferent to connecting with other people. So we see Napoleon desperate to connect with other people, but he doesn't have the skills to do it, or he does it in very odd ways. What you saw with Pedro was that Pedro was kind of understood that, and Pedro was still able to bond with him, and they were able to come together. Now, not making eye contact, for one thing, making up stories so people will like him. What in one scene, what did you do this summer? I was in Wyoming hunting wolverines, things of that nature. He's got 1 foot in his own world and 1 foot in reality. Again, I think the election forced him to head into reality and helped the two of them discover how effective they really can be when they turn off the noise. They turn down the noise from everyone around them, telling them how weird they are, which is what high school is about. So if we're looking at, you want to look at another clip. Hang on.
Can you bring me my chapstick?
No, Napoleon.
But my lips hurt real bad. Tina, you fat lard, come get some dinner.
What did you do last summer again?
I told you, I spent it with my uncle in Alaska hunting wolverines.
Did you shoot any?
Yes, like 50 of them. They kept trying to attack my cousins. What the heck would you do in a situation like that?
What kind of gun did you use?
A freaking 12 gauge. What do you think?
It'd be nice if you could pull me into town.
I say love, it is a flower, and you.
So talk about rich with material is what we saw there. I mean, there's so much heavy, really good, positive material there to talk about the neurodiversity. The question was, where do I begin? So,
right.
So when we see the neurodiversity running through the family, we see it with his cousin too. That his cousins, I'm online chatting with babes, and he's got rollerblades, but he still wants Napoleon to use his bike as a tow truck, which looks very odd. But what's also common for neurodiversity, we're more about what works. We don't always realize how it looks. So there's something my fiance refers to as peripheral. Peripheral, what's peripheral? That, him towing him into town on the bike works, it makes sense. But from a peripheral point of view, it looks very odd, but it's absent to everybody that may look odd and what people may think, for one. Okay, we also see, the other students what did you do? He notice he always closes his eyes. He
The whole time.
contact with people as he's speaking, which is also where we also saw that. And I got a question for you, Stephanie. What other film that we've covered on your show, this marvelous show you have, did we see that with?
Oh, I don't know.
Got you. Think for a minute.
Temple Grandin, maybe?
Nope. I haven't seen Temple Grandin for a long time. I'm going to rewatch it. Because you just interviewed her as well. But what other film involving me did we see that?
Oh, Richard Jewell. Thank you for that social context clue there.
Right. No problem. So we see that with Richard Jewell also, that when he's being questioned as a person of interest by the FBI, he closes his eyes as he speaks, which again would to the police indicated deception. But you see, for me, that's a sensory soothing behavior, which you see throughout Napoleon Dynamite as well, that when he's feeling anxious, he needs to soothe himself, but he's still determined to connect as well. I mean, making up stories that weren't true. Where'd you do this somewhere? Went to Alaska and hunted wolverines. Did you shoot them? Yeah, like 50, a 12 gauge, of course. Now he doesn't even own a gun, which is funny. Another comment, which is funny, is that he talks about how the gangs want to recruit him. But he's thinking about it. But Pedro's family does. They are gang affiliated, in fact, and it's one way they won the election for Pedro to become president. Was that, and this is also really significant, is that what he used his family members for, who at least appeared to be in a gang, was to stop the bullying of the weirder kids, of the weaker kids. That when they would try to bully, when Pedro was running for president, if his cousins or brothers who drove up in that car, they said, don't do it. And bullies backed off very quickly as well. So they used it for good. So the other piece we see in the clip I just showed you was when he is sensory happy, when he's part of the happy hands movement, he's in sensory heaven doing this, moving, his eyes are open, his mouth is open. He feels confident. He's in a zone, an expertise zone, as we call it, where neurodivergent folks can become kind of invincible, to be honest.
So I think our evidence that we've talked about, the difficulty reading social situations, unaware of how others perceive him, even with his masking at first with Pedro, that was not even typical masking. So maybe that's exaggerated.
When the film came out, the term masking didn't exist.
Right.
We're moving at breakneck speed in this space. I mean, we've changed the name of the diagnosis so many times, and it keeps changing. We're seeing excellent early intervention services. I mean, when people ask me to describe my practice, which has been there for 23 years, I say it's changed a lot. And what I'm saying is what we mostly see at Triad Psych are Napoleons and Pedros. And that's what makes the work so wonderful. We love coming to work today because this is now the majority of our client load. And we love it. We love it. We can't get enough of them. So that's all positive. But if Napoleon Dynamite didn't happen, this wouldn't be so cool. That in my autism course, Autism Through the Years, I talk about the role of pop culture. And if clinicians and special educators and whoever's working in the space thinks that pop culture doesn't directly affect their work, they're kidding themselves. There's a very direct impact on our work. And for the families we work with, that when I first came into the field in the 90s, the families were very marginalized. Mm-hmm. Now they're not, because of what's happened with Napoleon Dynamite, with the TV show Speechless, Minnie Driver, various things. The Good Doctor, the show The Good Doctor, has done a whole lot to make a whole lot of people's lives a lot better. One of my mentors, he was a philosopher in the public service. He was speaking to some people in Hollywood, and he said, remember, you're the arbiters of our culture. What you do matters, whether you're famous or not. And it's just extremely true. The Broadway show, The Strange Case of the Dog in the Middle of the Night, I never got to see it every time I was in New York, but that's another big factor.
That was actually mandatory reading for both of my girls in middle schools, Curious Incident of the Dog at Night or something like that. Yeah. Well, while you are going to load up for us something with Pedro, I'll review our case notes because we're going to turn our attention to Pedro because The internet doctors believe that he just has cultural differences. But what you and I have already talked about is for Napoleon.
See, there's no cultural difference that you don't make eye contact with someone, especially now I'm a social worker, so I study culture extensively and know how it affects behavior. So the first thing I'm going to say is that in Latin culture, you are expected to show deference and respect, but you are supposed to look someone in the eye, or at least look at their face. The only culture where you look down is often Asian cultures. You don't make eye contact, but you still maintain an eye connection. So I'm going to dispute that completely.
Okay, well, get ready for our case of Pedro. But we talked about Napoleon Dynamite. We talked this very clear social communication differences. Also, some of the clips you showed were the intense interest. He was drawing fantasy creatures, his fascination with the martial arts, that bow staff. He knew lots of animal facts. The sign language club that he was in, and dance, which, man, if we could find that when his dance scene is pretty fast. Maybe when we do the Pedro and Napoleon one together, we'll get the dance scene in there. Also, mostly lack of social masking. He dressed the same despite being ridiculed. He talked the same despite being ridiculed. You mentioned his eye contact. Literal and direct communication, how he met Pedro and how they kind of formed a friendship. Now, the internet doctor said there was no sensory issues, but I believe there was sensory issues. Like you said, the self-soothing with the sign language club and a specific chapstick that he really needed.
That's what I hear from the clip we just looked at, is that he used chapstick to soothe himself. For whatever reason, it's a sensory thing and a psychological thing that makes sense to him, that the chapstick did act as a soothing tool for him. It could be, it could be a sensory tool. For me, for example, if I'm doing anything even slightly hardcore, whether it's a house project with my hands, if I'm going hiking, if I'm going snorkeling, I don't have a pair right here. I have work gloves that I wear. And for some reason, that increases my abilities greatly. Something about being able to grab something with a grip or a glove that's designed to increase your grip and protect your hands makes a huge difference as well. So I think that can be part of it too. All right, so let's look at another.
You have a Pedro clip?
I do. Pulling it up now.
All right.
Where have you been?
I got sick. Do you think people will vote for me?
Heck yes. I'd vote for you. Plus, you're like the only guy at school who has a mustache.
That's true. If I win, you could be my secretary or something.
Vote for Summer.
You're right, I'm not voting for her.
Then who are you going to vote for?
Vote for Pedro Sanchez. Who do you think? Pedro offers you his protection.
Hello? I don't have much to say. If you vote for me, all of your wildest dreams will come true. Thank you.
All right, let me throw out all of the internet's why it's not and have you kind of argue against using the clip that we just saw. So this was the argument against from some wise person that I don't think is neurodiverse trained. All right, so this person said cultural differences. The things that you're observing with Pedro is simply he's a new kid, he's an outsider, he's experiencing cultural adjustments. Then they believe that he had a very strong social awareness, which I disagree with. Pedro understood social dynamics. He successfully runs a campaign. He understands how to persuade. He understands hierarchy of relationships, which definitely is not true. He does not have a restricted interest. He does not have social confusion, and he does not have any sensory preferences or differences. So you showed a bunch of different things in that one clip. So what say you, cinema profiler?
And I feel like I'm in court. You're saying this. I have my yellow pad here. As you speak, I'm writing things down for my rebuttal. So, or whoever I'm rebutting against, some random person out there on the internet. That first of all, let's look at the two of them. Okay, how does Napoleon process information? He closes his eyes as he manufactures language. Pedro looks up, which is the same thing as Napoleon closing his eyes. It's just a different way to process. Okay, that what we see here is slow processing speed, very slow processing speed. It doesn't mean what they're saying is wrong, but it's a way of enabling the mind to process better when your senses, there's something called sensory processing disorder, which it's very rare you're going to find a neurodiverse person who doesn't have that the different senses aren't going to sync by themselves. It's more laborious and concrete. So his need to look up when he processes information is a real strong sign of neurodiversity. That there is no, I study culture extensively because of my work, whether it be police culture, neurodiverse culture, Latino culture. In Boston, I did a tremendous amount of work with Haitian culture. That there is no Latino, there is not a Latino cultural norm to put your eyes up at the air and stare when you are processing information. In terms of him being sensory aware, that's completely false. I'm not going to use it. It's something we call BS. I'm going to call BS. I can say that, even though I know you're Christian as well. That if he had a social awareness, he would not have run. He would have said, I'm looking at the city. I mean, I knew in my high school, if I tried to do anything with student government, it wasn't going to happen because I had enough awareness to know that I wasn't popular by any stretch of the imagination. And even if I could have done great things for the school, the class, people were not going to vote for me because of this, because I had enough social awareness of that as well. What we see is his lack of social awareness and him being, again, unaware of the periphery around him in the school is what made him run. And we see a foil that Pedro could not have won on his own. He needed Napoleon, Napoleon needed him. And then the other woman who became Napoleon's kind of girlfriend, they all needed each other. And it also turns out that the underclass of kids, social underclass of kids in the school, needed both of them desperately, but they couldn't say so. They would never say it. What's interesting is, believe it or not, in my middle school, what you saw with that did actually happen. This one student, I grew up in a little town, everybody knew everybody, and he decided to run for student council president. And the other, as a joke, they said, when he comes to make the speech, cheer really, really loud and yell and get happy, and then don't vote for him. But let's go ahead and build him up. So when he went to make his speech, standing ovations, everything you saw in the film, there was one problem. When they did the election the next day in homeroom, everyone did vote for him and he did win. So it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I think also, whether we're dealing with neurodiverse adolescents or even if they're not neurodiverse, adolescence is a very hard time. Mm-hmm. And the best thing we can do as professionals, as therapists, is to train our clients to to overcome that fishbowl, to overcome the social perceptions, and they can achieve great things. So it's almost, they feel shackled, but we can break through shackles. And that's a lot of what Napoleon Dynamite was about. That's a lot of the therapy I think we all do in our group, this professional group we're a member of. I can't do this, I can't do that. Yes, you can, but you've got to put aside the perceptions and try. And because we do things differently and do things out of the box, we often win. And you could rename Napoleon Dynamite out of the box thinking.
Right.
You see, but that when they made the film, it was 2005, technology was here, but it was before Elon Musk. It was before, Bill Gates was already around, who we now know has made it clear he has Asperger's as well. So again, we see such a paradigm shift when it comes to even looking at this in only 20 years. Napoleon Dynamite came out in 2005, it's 2026. We're 21 years out, but that's still relatively rapid change. Social change, which is good. So the other thing is with Napoleon, when you see him in the back, with Pedro, when you see Pedro having a ritualistic bath, talk about an example of a sensory soothing behavior with a ritual. Things that made perfect sense to him. We have the religious candles with the religious icons on it. as well. Him taking a bath in the dark, which, by the way, if you're watching this and you've had a long day at work and you want to relax, there's nothing like taking a bath or a shower in the dark. You will come out of it very relaxed. So it's something I do all the time. Sometimes I even have a beer in my hand. That really adds to it too. But anyway, so what we see is again, them being able to operate in a sensory unfriendly environment, but adapting to the environment and then adapting the environment itself. When you see Pedro's campaign car come up with the very threatening looking people who may or may not be in a gang, and you see them quashing bullying, which should have been the job of the adults in the first place, what we're seeing is changing the environment itself. It's very important in our work that the shackles that many of our clients have or think they have, we teach them how to break it off. You know, a rabbi once said to me that he once saw a group of elephants whose huffs, I guess they call it elephant huffs, were tethered by shackles and metal cuffs and the such. And he said to the zookeeper, he said, you know, they could break right through that if they wanted to. He said, oh yeah, they could, but we put it on them when they're babies. So psychologically, they don't think they can. But yeah, they could snap that off in a second. And I think that's a lot of the work you and I do, Stephanie, is we take these psychological shackles, let's bust through them. And by the way, I had enough social awareness to know that student government was out of the question for me in high school. But as soon as I got to college, it was the first thing I did. I had a very rich career in the student government at Boston University. Very rewarding, met amazing people, did a lot of good program, learned a lot about life as well. So, you know, I felt that when I got to Boston from New Jersey, again, a little town very similar to where Napoleon and Pedro were, the shackles were gone. Nobody knew about my neurodiversity.
I think you made a great case for Pedro. Some of the other things that I had written down from watching a bunch of clips, you mentioned kind of how he watches before he speaks with his processing. He's processing internally.
Just like Richard Jewell, just like Richard.
Right. And there's other aspects when there were social games or social situations. He's on that periphery looking in. I agree with you that his differences are not just cultural because, like you said, the average person knows that student government is a popularity contest. And he was not only a person of color, new to the culture, the new kid, he also asked out the most popular girl for prom and give her a cake in another situation. So he was not aware. And that I don't think that that's just a cultural thing. He did also have his restricted interest. You pointed out the sensory differences. There's a space where he even shaves his head because he was too hot. And then he didn't know why he had done that right before he got up on stage to speak the day before he shaved his head. And he didn't really seem to have a reason why he wanted to run for student body president, except for...
Well, what you saw was he saw the sign. He saw a sign and it inspired him. And he saw, okay, well, I can do that too, can I? You see, it's interesting. His lack of social awareness gave him the boldness to run. You see what I'm saying? So it's a combination of strengths and weaknesses.
Absolutely. All right. So I think the case is closed. I think that through the clips we've seen, and if you've seen
then it's final.
So we have we're closing the case of Napoleon Dynamite and Pedro Sanchez, who were hiding in plain sight. I'm going to have our profiler back, and we're going to talk more about Napoleon and Pedro's friendship, because we want to, the month that we'll be talking about that is friendships and relationships of neurodivergent folks. So thank you for joining me today, Dave, as we close the case of Napoleon and Pedro. And we want to remind you, viewers, to watch, like, subscribe, and respectfully comment, and join us again when we have a discussion about neurodivergent relationships. And we want to remind you there's no crime in being different. We hope you embrace uniquely you.